To track the destructive path of the Mount St. Helens eruption was to follow the plume of ash. Some of the gritty sand made its way around the world and even caused people in Britain to blame a late spring snowstorm on it. The ash devastated parts of central Washington for days, stranding motorists and turning light into darkness. Cameraman Henry Zinman and I went to the city of Yakima to see how the people of the area are doing a year later.
And the black cloud came. And it turned from a beautiful day just like this until as dark as any night you were ever, well, you were here, you saw it.
Yakima and other communities in the path of the ash fallout were smothered by an eerie, almost make-believe world of darkness and ash. In a matter of minutes, day became night for Valley residents. Streetlights were turned on. Motorists, many on their way home from church, turned on their car headlights and slowly made their way home. Visibility was almost zero, and it stayed that way for almost 12 hours. The arrival of the ash caught farmers and ranchers off guard. When finally venturing out, they met in each other's hayfields to find out what the others were going to do. They wanted to protect their field crops, fruit, and livestock.
The birds were absolutely quiet. There wasn't a peep. The livestock was quiet. It was an eerie feeling. And of course, the next morning after it was over with, we went out to assess our damage, and it was a sad sight.
Even today, Dave Hull worries about the long-term effect the ash will have on his breed cattle. They've eaten sandy hay and grass for a year now. He knows their teeth have been worn down by it. It's just a matter of time until he will know the final results. As for his crops, Hull Ranch lost 80 acres of corn, a loss of about $8,000. Other problems? Machinery damage of combines and balers. It may be a couple of years until the exact dollar loss can be computed. Dave Hull has a beautiful ranch. 2 of his 4 sons and his dog Telly are constant companions. He doesn't consider last year a bad one. In fact, he feels he broke even, and in some cases, he may have come out ahead.
It was a benefit. The ash was relatively white, and then and it reflected the sun away and kept the ground cool. And we had fantastic grain crops last year. It was one of the better years we've had.
This year, however, is a different story. The valley is in the middle of a drought year. Dave does not blame the weather on the volcano. He says droughts and wet years will come and go, regardless of Mount St. Helens. The ranchers in the area have plowed under most of the ash and continue to wait and see what the final effects will be. The city, however, has less of a mystery and more of a nuisance. Yakima city officials couldn't rely on past experience for dealing with the ash fall, and there was no pre-planning for such a disaster. After all, Yakima is 85 miles from the volcano, and no one expected to feel such strong repercussions from it. When city officials tried to contact both the local and state emergency service offices for help, those offices were either closed or unprepared to deal with that type of a situation. In fact, the emergency broadcast system alert for the Yakima area was never activated, but it was only a matter of hours before the city pulled itself together.
Of course, it was a tremendous effort using city forces as well as manpower and equipment from other larger government jurisdictions, notably Seattle, King County, the city of Portland, and Multnomah County.
The Yakima Valley closed down. Schools and businesses were suspended for several days. This made the cleanup easier. Valley residents formed neighborhood cleanup programs too and worked hard and aggressively. It paid off. All told, the city of Yakima alone removed over 500,000 tons of ash. The gritty sand was used mainly as landfill, plowed under, and even bought by people in California as souvenirs. A year later, to the tourist, it would appear the nuisance is gone.
It's still in the hills in the area, and when there's a good wind blowing through the city, you can still see quite a bit of ash in the air. But on a day that's calm and clear, it's not noticeable.
The disaster still isn't paid for. It cost the city of Yakima close to $4 million. As of now, net federal government payments are only approximately 60% of the total disaster cost. At this point, the city is responsible for coming up with the rest. The Yakima Valley was fortunate. No one died because of the volcano's blast. But hospital crews worked round the clock treating people with respiratory problems. Masks were worn for protection. They probably helped forest and maintenance workers the most. However, there is still some concern about the respiratory disorder silicosis.
If they have more than average susceptibility, if they get repeated exposure to small particle silica over a period of months or years. And some of them may develop that 10, 20, 30 years from now. I think we know the numbers won't be large.
Being prepared for something as powerful as the May 18th eruption is almost impossible, but Yakima City officials say they wouldn't do things much differently than they did a year ago. However, it was agreed the city could organize and use local resources better and put more efficient communications into effect faster. Even though the people of the Yakima Valley suffered stress, loss of crops and livestock, and live under the constant threat of future ash eruptions, they seem to somehow hold on to their sense of humor.
Well, there's not much way of preparing. I think if it came again, the last person out of Yakima would have to turn the lights out.
And Richard, it's interesting to note that winds in the Pacific Northwest only blow from Mount St. Helens toward Portland 4% of the time. So the odds of Portland being covered by ash are minimal. But as we recall, we were hit twice since the May 18th eruption.
Yes, once in May and again in June. That's remarkable. Thanks, Kim. Tomorrow, Essex Porter takes a look at the city